allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
From the Troy Police Department, Officer Randall C. French. Well, at this point in the program, I would normally move on to something else, but now I have to backtrack because, as usual, I skipped something. I missed one of our awards. So at this time, and this one really does not need much introduction, I missed the award for academics. It's not easy, folks. We make them take spelling tests here. They all asked yesterday if we could do away with that. At this time, I'm pleased to announce the award for excellence in academics goes to Randall C. French to the Troy Police Department. Just made his chief very proud.
I started working with Randy French in 2006 when I came out of the academy. My first real experience with Randy, I was day patrol. I was actually in field training. Jerry Young was my field training officer, and it was Christmas Eve. We were working Zone 1 together, and Jerry and I were back at the station filling out some paperwork, going through some FTO stuff, and Randy French called out with a traffic stop down in the area of Tyler and 2nd Street. And shortly thereafter, as we start to make our way down there, he starts to yell out with a foot pursuit. And I remember it because on our way down there, Jerry Young is screaming about Randy French, saying that this guy just doesn't know when to stop working. It's Christmas Eve. I'm trying to get some training done, and he's out there stopping cars, and now he's fighting with a guy. But that was Randy French. He was a guy that always wanted to work, no matter what was going on. He was a guy that was gonna work, and that's what made him great. Even all the tough times he went through here at Troy PD, he was always a worker, and he was always out there to get the job done and serve the community.
His foot went to the floor at 11:35, and it came back off at 7:20 when we turn in the morning. And he would proceed to turn over every rock in his zone and stop every car, stop every person, just constantly working.
He just immediately set himself apart from a lot of people, just as a worker. His incredible work ethic was just immediate.
I've known Randy for over 10 years. Actually, my first interaction with Randy was before I was a Troy police officer. He had pulled me over one time. I was on my way to the gym, and he pulled me over, and I didn't have my license on me, and he gave me the 3rd degree, was very methodical from start to finish. He did not write me a ticket. Everyone believes that he did write me a ticket, and I was just covering for him because he was just so adamant of the vehicle and traffic law, penal law, everything like that. He just wouldn't shut it off. Where some guys, they had that on and off switch, Randy was just go all the time.
In early 2004, Randy had graduated from the police academy at Zone 5, and he was in his probationary period. And at that point in time, he was sent up to SOS, Special Operations Section, which is the Narcotic and Vice Unit, so that he could see how a vice unit works. We got a complaint from RPI that some students up there were selling drugs. So we were very fortunate at that point in time to get Randy French in our unit for several weeks because Randy was a recent graduate of RPI. Randy had a 4-year degree in mathematics, and he had all his sweatshirts, book bags with RPI logos on them. So I asked Randy if he would consider working some undercover work for us. And Randy, being the guy that he was, He was absolutely into it right away. He wanted to help. He wanted to do. He wanted to experience that. We ended up doing a buy into a student at RPI for like an ounce of weed, which happens to be a felony. And we sent Randy up there to the dorm where this kid was. And Randy arrived and introduced himself. And this kid, right away, he says, "Are you a cop?" And Randy, like without missing a beat, he was like, "No, I'm not a cop. I go here. Don't you remember seeing me around campus?" And the kid was like, "Okay." So he sent him. He sold him the ounce weed. And several days later, we picked that kid up, and he decided that the best thing for himself was to participate with us and do intros for Randy as an undercover. So over the next several months that Randy was with us, we went up there multiple times, and Randy, with this kid introing him, what drugs? Very successful operation that several months later ended up in probably half a dozen people being arrested for selling marijuana, cocaine, LSD, heroin, you name it. They were selling it up there in the frats. And Randy was kind of the hero on that. We could not have done that without him. So that was my first introduction to Randy, and it told me that Randy had a complex personality. He was very, very smart. He was not only bright, but he had an immense amount of common sense.
He was just extremely intelligent, just an extremely intelligent person. But with that book smarts, there was street smarts and common sense, and just excellent decision making ability and a maturity that he displayed that was really, really beyond his years for a kid that just, came out of college, which is a whole nother conversation. As I'm sure you're aware or have been told, Randy came from RPI to us. He had a degree in applied mathematics, and I'm sure I wasn't alone thinking when he got here, when you found out what he did and where he came from, why are you here? why are you here doing this? And but it just became apparent that he was there because he wanted to be there, and he had a burning passion to do the job, and he just hit the ground running and never stopped.
His intellect was off the chart. He was just like super nerd, right? He did math with letters. So he was, most would say, what were you doing here with a degree from RPI in applied mathematics? But as it turned out, it was awesome. He was a creative, outside the box thinker, and he was a great leader, or turned out to be a great leader over the years.
Years later, Randy wanted to join the SWAT team, and I happened to be the commanding officer of it at the time. And it's a very demanding 2-day process. You have to pass 5 different phases to be considered for SWAT. Well, again, Randy didn't miss a beat. He did it first time, passed, and the chief appointed him to be on the SWAT team.
Yeah, that was Randy's first raid, as a matter of fact, and it happened. I forget the exact address, but it was pretty much on the corner of Burdett Avenue and Hoosick Street. And we went up, and we were, geared up, getting ready to do our thing. We were en route to the house to hit it, and I forget who. It may have even been me. I don't recall exactly, but somebody mentioned to him, hey, did you forget something? And he's looking around, patting himself, and he couldn't figure it out. And then somebody pointed out that his helmet was missing. So we rectified it there and made sure it was taken care of. But as we often do in our line of work, we kind of reminded him of that for a while afterwards.
We tend to instill a sense of autonomy and self-thinking in our leadership style within the team, because they need to be thinking operators, not just mindless robots following orders. So Randy, that suited him. That suited him just fine. So a number of years on the team, he did outstanding work. He was a great teammate, and he began to show various admirable leadership characteristics or qualities. I was advanced to the position of team leader, and then Randy was advanced to one of the element leader positions. So I had the opportunity to work then within the tactical world as his supervisor of sorts, even though we're the same rank. Like everything else he did great at it. And it's funny because if you talk to Randy, he was so humble about it, and often would think, I could do better. I didn't do this well, or I didn't do that well. Never admitting that it was part of the growing process. Never wanting to admit that it's part of the growing process or learning process as a leader or a supervisor. That you make mistakes, you learn from mistakes, and you do it better the next time. Try not to repeat the mistakes. Randy, generally speaking, did things, not even generally speaking, almost always knock things out of the park.
It's funny because when this happened, I don't think I was unique in being flooded by a lot of memories of Randy and everything that had occurred, and just when they come, they just, again, I'm not unique. I'm sure they come intensely for a lot of people. They have and continue to do for me. But I was thinking about it not too long ago, and the common denominator, the thread that runs through almost every single one of these memories is just laughing with them. It is just laughing all the time, because you just had this super positive, infectious sense of humor.
What makes Randy Randy is a cop's cop. Randy is a guy you could turn to for questions, guidance. You knew you were going to get an answer, but you also knew he was going to bust your chops when he gave you that answer in his sarcastic undertone with things sometimes.
Are you being an asshole?
Typical Randy, awkward and goofy at times, but his heart was always in the right place.
His reputation precedes him, but Bob Godet is quite skilled as a martial artist and just generally a crazy guy. So Randy thought it would be a really fun idea to jump on Bob's back and try and tackle him during one of our DT sessions. And Bob ended up flipping Randy upside down, and he hit the floor so hard, everybody could feel the thud in their bones. And it was the howls that Randy let out. But he would always do stuff like that, and he would always just get crushed. That would be so funny. Those are funny stories.
Just laughing with him about everything. Me laughing at something he did, him laughing certainly at things I did, and just laughing at each other. And then just one of the things that about Randy, one of the many things about Randy and his sense of humor was he was just so self-deprecating in his sense of humor. He was the first one to make fun of himself for anything. When something went sideways, or he was always quick to find a joke in something, or the humor in a situation, which I'm not telling you anything you don't know. That's a pretty important attribute to have in our line of work, my former line of work. But he was just the one thing that stands out and just continues to stand out, and even memories that come back that I've forgotten about, that when I think of him, almost invariably they involve just laughter, which is a gift, I guess, considering what the blow we've all taken.
His smarts definitely showed up all the time. He was a master, and he brought other things to the table. He was a paramedic with years of experience as a paramedic, and he became a paramedic within our SWAT team to take care of our people if they were seriously injured.
Kevin Collins, I'm an emergency physician here at Albany Medical Center, working in the emergency department, and been very involved in EMS for pretty much most of my adult life. Started working at Empire Ambulance probably back in 2002, which is where I first met Randy. We worked together pretty well. I think it's safe to say we had a pretty similar sense of humor. Being a doctor, obviously, have a little bit of that book smart, kind of goofy sense of humor that certainly Randy had as well. And so we initially met each other back in 2002 and worked a lot through both EMS. And then Randy came to me with an idea, as Randy often does. He would get the idea in his head that he wanted to do something, and damn it, no one was going to tell him no. He wanted to get more medical care capabilities for the ERT team. And so he asked me, Kev, how do we get basically paramedics on the ERT team? How do we get that certified through the state? And I told him, Randy, it's never going to happen. There's too many institutional barriers between it, so let's come up with a different plan. So that's how I basically started working with the ERT team as a tactical medical provider. And certainly Randy and I spent a lot more time through that, working with the team. And that's, where we did a lot of tactical medical stuff with not just him, but also with the rest of the team, the guys on the ERT team.
Hi, I'm Ryan French. I'm the chief of the North Greenwich Ambulance. I am Randy's supervisor at his part-time job where he worked as a medic with us for 8 years. Where to begin with Randy? It's unbelievable. Randy's one of the best employees I've ever had work for me, and one of the best coworkers I've ever had the privilege of working with. He's was one of the best medics I've ever met, ever worked with.
First time I met Randy was at a training that Troy held. We were working together, and we were being introduced into a new evolution of tactical medicine. And so they invited us over. We went to the roll call room, and we've got Albany med doctors there. We've got all of our paramedics. And the person who's teaching the course is actually this guy named Randy French. At the time, it didn't make a lot of sense to me, because you've got an officer with Troy PD that's teaching tactical medicine essentially straight out of the battlefield in the company of these doctors that work in some of the most technical ERs around the country. And he did an outstanding job. And I really didn't even know that he was an officer or an operator. He was so professional, so smart, it didn't make any sense that he would be an operator on the team. But that's where he was. Obviously, that's where he came from. He's a smart guy. And that's the kind of professionalism that we've come to expect from Troy PD.
What stood out in my mind when I began to think on Randy and think of his impact was, as a young patrol officer, when I served for him as he's my sergeant. Those young patrol officers, you want to go out and do proactive work, and at times it's complicated because you feel as though you might be bothering other zone partners or other supervisors. But Randy was next to you when you did it and led you throughout the way and educated you throughout the process. And he made you into more than just a patrol officer. If you wanted to take an incident a little further and start investigating yourself, and he'd lead you through that process, not only with his education and competency, but his belief in you and his encouragement.
I worked the south end of the city, Zone 1, and Randy was the road sergeant. I'd call him nightly and say, hey, boss, I'm sitting on this. Can I sit on this? And he would let calls stack up and hold while we did proactive stuff in our zone. Little did I know, he was hiding around the corner just waiting for the foot chase to start, the car chases to start, so he could be part of it. And that's just how he was. He didn't take a back seat to the action or to the work. He wanted to be fully involved in it. But he let you do your own thing.
To say that he taught me a lot is an understatement. Not only did he teach me a lot, but we had a lot of fun at the same time, which is rare, especially with somebody with 17 years on, as he had. When you get to that point in your career, usually I feel like you get burnt out a little bit. And for him, that just wasn't the case.
I don't know of a lot of people that could match him in that. I certainly can't. But I mean, you come to work and you would try to you would try to best your ability to do what you could every day and do what they're paying you to do. And some days you had more to give than you had on other days. But with him, it was just the same. It was just the same all the time. Just just the intensity and the work ethic and his positive attitude, and again his sense of humor. He was just a force multiplier. He made every situation better just by virtue of being there, because of what he brought.
I had met Randy and his wife a few times about 10 plus years ago. And one day, out of the blue, he called me up at school and wanted to know if he and Bob Gaudette could come up and talk to me about partnering to create a cadet post, a police cadet post. So I met with them, and it was really a perfect partnership. I had the kids, I had the space, and I had the equipment, and Randy had the Troy Police Department.
He was always a favorite, and the cadets really, again, just like I looked up to him as well. The way he commanded the cadet post classroom, if you will, it was like that of an educator, like your cool teacher that you loved in high school that was always funny and you loved going to their class. Even I will like to watch him when he was up there. Articulate but hilarious. Maybe dropped a couple F-bombs a little too much. That was what he was notorious for, and everybody laughs about it because he was sort of unfiltered, but he did a great job, and again, he was a favorite.
He was so into it and so full of energy. So much time is invested, and none of the advisors that participate in the post get paid. It's all volunteer, and there's a lot of behind the scenes work. And that, those initial years, Randy did the heavy lifting for sure. There's paperwork, and there's the meetings twice a month, but there's also uniforms and rules and procedures, policies and procedure manual that had to be written.
I joined the Troy Police Cadet Post back in 2013. That's where I met Randy. Randy welcomed me with open arms into the cadet post. He's a very intelligent man. He always brought humor to the cadet post. Always wanted us there. He loved what he did. He was always happy to be there with us. Always happy to share stories with us. He would bring us on ride-alongs. Encouraged all of us to work hard to become ultimately a police officer. I looked up to him. That's one of the main guys that I would look to with questions to become a police officer, how to become a Troy police officer.
And even on a personal level, I've heard stories from some of the kids where they'd be on ride-alongs or they would have a problem and they'd approach him and he would give good fatherly sound advice to them, and it's changed them.
I've known Sergeant French since I was probably 14 years old, maybe even younger, 13 the youngest. And I knew him not only through just the cadet post and stuff like that, but I work in the ER, so I knew him coming in through ambulances as well and stuff like that. So I've known him for quite a while now, and he was kind of a big male role model, one of my big male role models in my life, so he was pretty important to me.
I got to work with him when I went to the Detective Bureau as a field intelligence officer. I believe that was 2013. Randy was in DB at the time. And again, no surprises. He just came in every day, ready to work cases. And he did. He just came in, got his keys and his radio, and hit the ground running.
After patrol, he left. He went to the Detective Bureau. A few years later, I joined him over in the Detective Bureau, and I had the opportunity to work some cases with him. One that I think speaks best about Randy was a case that we worked together in December of 2018. It initially came in as a code enforcement complaint that was an anonymous tip that got assigned to him because there was believed to maybe be some animal hoarding going on inside. So he was asked to take a look at it. So December 18th, he gets assigned the case. he goes up, takes a look at the house, doesn't really see a whole lot going on other than the place is really dirty and nasty. Some real foul smells coming out of there. Knocks on the door, doesn't get an answer. Shortly thereafter, he gets to go ahead to sign a search warrant, fill out a search warrant. Search warrant gets signed, and he stops over and says, "Hey, you want to go for a ride? We're just going to go do a search warrant on this house really quick. And by the way, grab the Ram." So I'm like, all right, that's weird. But so we go up there, and it was 92 Campbell Avenue.
With a case of animal hoarding in Troy.
A Troy couple is facing multiple counts of animal cruelty.
Accused of hoarding more than 100 animals in their home on Campbell Avenue. David and Michelle Hempstead.
David and Michelle Hempstead. One vet even telling investigators she believed the hoarding situation was also used as a feline breeding facility. Do you have anything to say about the charges against you? Hey. 17 counts. Get out of here.
We choke a horse going in there.
We can see that there's animal cages all over. House is full from floor to ceiling. It's animal cages. What initially looks like just puppies inside these cages. So we go inside. We take the mail that's in there out of the house, and we start searching the house. And it turns out that there are upwards of 100 animals in cages in deplorable and disgusting conditions. And in typical Randy fashion, he was right in the mix. He put a Tyvek suit on. He was in there taking dogs out of cages, playing with the dogs in the house, carrying cats out. Over about a 4-hour period, it took him to get all of these animals out of this house. And that was just who Randy was. He had a love for people. He had a love for animals. And he was the first one to get his hands dirty. I know Randy went down there to the Humane Society and checked on those animals almost weekly, because on occasion I did go down with him. And he really cared about those animals and what their outcome was going to be.
You guys can have a seat right there.
Could not remember your last name.
Healer.
I know. Now I know, but I could not remember.
Hi, I'm Randy French.
Hi. Oh, you're the famous Randy French.
Ooh, why? Why is that?
All
bad?
over the site that they have.
Oh my God, yeah. Well, unfortunately, he and I got roped into this at the last minute. So, trust me, I'm infamous more than famous. They're not. They weren't perfectly cleaned. But they're not even reasonably clean. Sure. But you.
How do you give up animals that you've had for so long?
You bring the Humane Society and give it to people that can probably care for them. Okay,
but
listen to me. I heard we had all these animals, okay, and you just don't. But it's not okay. It's not okay. So it's not okay. I don't feed my kids because I don't have the money for it. It doesn't make it okay if my kids die. All right, sir. Thank you. You ate it? Yes. You're free to go. Thank you. Come on.
That hedgehog had food and water.
Okay, but his eyeball blew out of his head.
Jury selection has ended in the Gabriel Vega murder trial. He's accused in the death of Vanessa Milligan and her unborn child. Her body was found after the fire in 2014. This one here, opening statements are expected to begin sometime tomorrow.
Every once in a while, you'll come across a case, and that case just kind of like sticks to the wall of your memory, and it just you never scrub it off. And that in that case in particular, we were very calculated. We were very calculated with respect to how we went at the suspect in the case. So it took months of going down a certain road, the narrative with this kid, to get him comfortable, and it was very, very difficult.
You know, when he decided he was going to do something, he would spend time researching what he thought was, the best avenue for it. And when he had his plan of action set, he would attack it with determination that you rarely see in people. A lot of people find that once they have a plan in place, they'll start working through stuff. But if there's issues or there's barriers, a lot of times people get frustrated, and that causes the plan to get derailed. I don't think I've ever seen that be the case with Randy. It seemed as though the more challenges that you put in front of him, the more he tended to thrive on that. He was definitely goal-focused and driven, and that was part of the reason why I think he was as good at his job as he was.
We have this witness who has no reason to lie to us. No reason. Says, I saw Gabe leaving her house that night. We have another person. Again, I'll get to that in a minute. Right before the fire started. Right before the fire. Okay? Then we get another person who was with Vanessa, who said that when she left, the reason she left, Vanessa said, leave that door unlocked because Gabe's coming over. Again, a completely separate person. These people have no reason to lie to us. You have every reason to lie to us.
Him thinking on his feet so fast, so witty on his feet. We were literally interviewing a homicide suspect, and there were certain nuances and parts that just had to be executed very carefully, or else it was going to just come right off the rails. And Randy was able to. We both did a good job, but Randy in particular was able to kind of keep that train on the tracks, and ultimately at trial a year after the interview, he was convicted.
Wright was first convicted in 1988. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison, but last October, State Supreme Court Judge Andrew Cerisia threw out Wright's sentence after new evidence was presented.
So the case, it was a double homicide arson case. It was a case where the individual originally got convicted. Richard Wright originally got convicted, and after some time, there was a motion to reopen the case made by his defense attorney, who at the time was Mike McDermott. So I got a phone call from the clerk, and at the time, again, I knew nothing about Richard Wright. I was 6 years old at the time that this happened. So and I'm not from the area, so I had no idea who he was or what had happened. So they contacted me, and they asked me if I wanted a special prosecutor assignment. I really didn't have, any assistance, with how I was going to go about, investigating this case. I literally had gotten all of the files, and it was the chief assistant that recommended that, I contact Randy, if I needed any help. Before that, I didn't know Randy. I had never even heard his name before. Danny Williams was a witness that ended up testifying that the Richard Wright had admitted to him that he had started the fire. Danny Williams had since this incident had lived out to Colorado for, several years. So Randy went out, talked to him on a couple of occasions. And after speaking with him, Randy was able to convince the guy to avail himself to the jurisdiction. Randy worked hard. He really did. But no matter my experience in dealing with him was, no matter how much he had on his plate, he always found time to get done what needed to be done in this case, because he knew that it was the right thing to do. We had to disprove any other accidental cause, right? And then after that, we had to prove that, it was, the defendant had actually committed the crime, right? So, tracking down people, Randy, tracking down people that are now 30 years older, it's just, what he did was almost impossible, right? But, they told us when we took the case that it was going to be impossible to win. And not for nothing, but I truly believe that because of Randy's help, we actually ended up with more evidence in 2018 to show that the defendant committed the crime than they had when they convicted him in the 80s.
Randy was a warrior. And those who know him certainly know that he didn't back down from a challenge. And there were very few things that would make Randy feel uncomfortable. When things were going sideways, either in operation or, in planning, Randy was the guy that would always say, all right, let's stop. Let's work the problem. It didn't seem like you could ever face him. and finding people that have that ability to stay calm in the middle of significant turmoil around them, that's a unique skill. And one of the ones that I think, I admired most about Randy, working in medicine, for as long as I have, I've certainly seen a number of high stress situations. And, what I found is that the people who are able to kind of harness that nervous energy and make it into something positive, it's actually a very unique skill. And that's one that Randy certainly had.
We worked together on a lot of cases that he had in DB. He helped me with a lot of things in his just encyclopedic knowledge is so much. Just not only the job itself, the penal law, the criminal procedural law, the Family Court Act. I mean, you name it. The hard, computer hardware and software, and he was just a go-to person for so many things, and so many jobs. I certainly took advantage of his expertise in so many things, but I know an awful lot of other people did too, and he never said no.
I could tell you that his people on SWAT, including me, we would have followed him anywhere because Randy had a natural ability to be a leader. His people trusted him because he could make decisions very, very quickly. They were really accurate decisions. And then they always knew, and I always knew, that the people he was leading, he put them first. And they knew that he wouldn't endanger their lives unnecessarily in any dangerous situation. So he was a true born leader.
He was the team leader when I came to the SWAT team, and he ran the SWAT team just like he ran everything else. Great boss, always had your back, really cared about his guys and how their lives were and what was going on in their lives, and if they ever needed anything. That's who he was. He always put everybody else first, and he never wanted credit for anything. He didn't want to be on camera. He was always the first to give everybody else the credit for a job that he typically did. He was always the tip of the spear for us. He was always pushing us to be better and made sure that we had the best training that was out there. And he's going to be dearly missed.
601. Central to 0601. Sergeant Randy French. Central to all units. Take Unit 601, Sergeant Randy French, out of service. End of watch, April 30, 2020. We thank Randy for his service and dedication to the citizens of Troy, to his fellow officers, and to all who knew him. Randy, rest in peace.
I would like to reiterate the fact that, even when the procession for Randy went by the station and everybody was lined up, there was kids that weren't even in the program going on 6+ years. Kids from different states that came back for that, all for him, because he mattered that much to them. It shows a lot, how many people do you know that taught you in high school, and how many of their funerals have you gone to? Your coaches, and we meet twice a week, and they might have been with us for a few years, and they're showing up for the procession. It's powerful if you think about it. And that's the legacy that Randy left behind.
I found out what type of person Randy was. Strong-willed, basically during a rough patch in Randy's life and his career here in the Troy Police Department. The PBA and Randy went through a lot. I saw from start to finish how strong Randy was as a person, and how he was able to deal with adversity, and how he was able to just keep coming to work day after day, putting in the effort, trying to make Troy a better place, just like he did when he first took his oath of office, to the day that end of watch on April 30th.
I remember there was a day, obviously he had a lot of tough things that were going on. I think he was treated pretty unfairly in the media. And I was at a meeting with him, getting ready for a tactical event out in Oriskany State Preparedness Training Center. And that day, he was with John Becker, and they got a phone call about something that was going to be in the media, about some things that were being discussed about the incident he was involved in. And he was, it would probably seem like it was more upsetting to me than it was to him. He just always, at least from our perspective, from my perspective, was very stoic, seemed to let things roll off of him. And I think that that's a credit to probably the support structure that he had in his family. I couldn't imagine the amount of stress that he's been under the last few years. But from where we stood, I don't think you could ever really see that. And that's a credit to him and his family.
He was putting himself through paramedic school over the course of the last year and a half, which is a very difficult class program to put himself through while he was working full-time with the PD and working part-time with us. Unfortunately, he came just short of being able to complete taking his paramedic certification. He had completed everything, including all his practical skills and everything prior to COVID hitting. And so we are getting a paramedic card for him from New York State to honor him. He has earned that paramedic card, even though as a CCT, I would put him up against any other paramedic in the capital region. He was just as good and just as knowledgeable, if not more knowledgeable. So
to see how eager he was to work with us made me feel like that I had to work harder for him. And it just showed how much of a street cop he was. And that's something that has always stuck with me. And I'm going to carry that throughout my career, and I'm going to work hard for him, and I'm going to use everything that he taught me.
I mean, I know we're kind of memorializing his great deeds and just the way he was as a policeman. But there was so much more to him than just being a great cop. He was, a ridiculous, loyal. It was like an apt description is failing me right now, but just a fiercely loyal father, a fiercely loyal husband who absolutely adored his wife. Not that there was never a bump in the road, but he always would have a kind word for his wife. Always spoke so highly about his wife, the utmost respect. So those were two of the things that stuck out most. Family, like father and husband, and then cop. Did it define who he was? Was there a whole lot of cop stuff and pictures at his house? Yep. But it was just as more important role to be a good father and husband than it was to be a good sergeant or a good detective, or so.
That's the kind of guy he was. And we very much miss him at this point in time.
Danielle had reached out and said, do you think he's going to be okay mentally? And I remember hearing the report from colleagues that were there, and they said, yeah, it was pretty crazy. He had about 4 or 5 people trying to hold him down, and he's still grabbing people and trying to bend their arms down. I'm like, Danielle, he's still doing arm bars and wrist locks to try to get people off of him. So I think Randy was still in there, and again, that just goes to his spirit. You absolutely could not keep him down, and it's one of the memories that, looking at the time right before Randy died, it's really hard for me to accept that as a physician. But I look at it and say there's a lot of, good stories about Randy still being the fighter right up until the very end. He never gave up. And, the people that know Randy know that that's not surprising at all. That's just who he was. He was a fighter.
When a memory of him comes, and they come often and they hit hard, he left such a void, such a big hole in just so many lives, myself included, and I still think of him every day, and on different times, usually multiple times a day, and I'm sure that's going to go on for quite a while. But he just left such a void with us, and I'm just talking his professional life. And I think of the void that he left with his family, Danielle, Kaylin, and Juliana, and that's just mind-numbing. And he always spoke of his family, and they come up so often, and he spoke with them with such love and intensity, and he was just so when I think of the void that he left in my life and his friends and his colleagues' life, and I start feeling maybe a little sorry for myself. I think that it's incomparable to the void that he left his family. So